Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to a discussion wherein we'll be taking up how do you approach the upcoming UPSC Civil Services mains examination. What should be your strategy? What are important points to keep in mind? And ultimately, how do you approach 20th September 2024 when finally the mains examination will begin? But before I take up the discussion, before me and Abhishek sir start with the discussion, a very important announcement. For all of you who wish to ace the UPSC mains examination and your friends as well, we have come out with a very comprehensive mains program. The name of the program is Conquer Mains 2024. The important USPs of the program are: 1. We are going to start this from the 1st July 2024. The first class will be on YouTube. Second, every class important subjects will be taken up, and the faculties, the subject experts will be taking up 5 topics in every topic, every class, and with detailed notes will be discussing these topics. And not only this, of the 5 topics that we have covered on that day, we will take up 1 question and have a detailed explanation. How are you supposed to write the answer? How should you reach the word limit in this particular question? And on the remaining topics, every Sunday we will have a test. We will provide the feedback. We will give you the right evaluation. In addition to this, the program will cover all the important subjects from the GS paper 1, 2 and 3. And we will also give you comprehensive notes so that you will be saving your precious time and it will help you in revising very well. Now let me start the discussion.
One question for this: how can the students enroll? Now, should they go to the Unacademy website, or is the link is given in the description box?
Sir, the link is given in the description box, and if you are not able to find the description box or the link in the box, you can go to Unacademy store, and in that search for Quality Enrichment Program Conquer Mains 2024. You can enroll using that particular link. Now before we start, on behalf of all of you, I want to ask a question to Abhishek sir.
Sir.
So what do you think? When the students write the answers in the mains examination, should they all follow a particular structure for the answer? Is it a mandate that they are supposed to follow the structuring?
Right. So welcome to the session. I hope that you are enjoying these type of initiatives which we are taking so that you ace the mains examination. Coming to the question, sir. See, at the end of the day, the content for every candidate remains the same when it comes to questions, sir. So what really matters is structure. How do you put the content in a specific structure? One thing we already know is that you have to have an introduction, a body and a conclusion, and you don't write this in the examination, but you have to keep it in mind. Not necessarily every question should have a very elaborate introduction, but by following this structure in your mind, what you can do is that you can put in the data or the arguments in a very structured manner. See, in history, for example, in economics, there will be minor differentiation on how the student is arguing. However, if the structure of the answer is very haphazard, it shows that the mentality of the student was haphazard, that he is remembering points in the examination. So structure is key, because that gives a very clear indication to the examiner that I understand the question and I know the answer also. Sir, at the same point of time, I'll ask you a very important question that was, because a lot of students count words. How important is the word limit, and do we need to count the words in the examination? Because a lot of students do that.
Sir, in the mains examination, what I would advise all of you is to practice from today itself. In the mains examination, please understand, 20 questions are there and you'll have 3 hours. Although 10 questions will be of 10 marker and remaining 10 questions of 15 markers. So you will not have sufficient time to write a very good answer for all the 20 questions. That's a fact, by the way. So approximately, if you calculate, you will have roughly around 9 minutes for every question.
Which is quite less.
Yes, it's very, very less. That's the reason you will not have sufficient time to sit, count the number of words.
Right.
So what is the solution then? Whenever you practice answer writing, from today itself, make it a habit. If you take a A4 sheet or the sheet which basically is a replica of UPSC, in that particular sheet, when you write an answer, write normally in your handwriting as usual that you write. And when you keep on practicing this answer writing, keep on counting. You will have a very good idea in one sheet, or let's say one side of the sheet, on an average, how many words are you able to write.
Right.
And when you write the mains answer, you will have to keep it in mind that the size of the letters that you write, the way you write, the spacing that you provide, you will have to do it as usual that you do it from today itself. If you do that in the mains examination, once you finish a side of the sheet, you will automatically understand you have completed 150 words, you have completed 220 words on an average, you have completed, let's say, 250 words, assuming the question is for 250 words. At the same point of time, sir, is the word limit very important?
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. See, as sir said that you should know how much does in your handwriting a 250 or 150 word answer look like on a sheet. So that, see, the examiner obviously is not going to count each and every word. So if you are up by 10, plus minus 10, maximum 20 works. See, it shouldn't be that when you're writing in the sheet, you're cramming it, because that will show that you are trying to actually push in a lot of words in the same space. It should be good handwriting, it should be very clean, and as you said, sir, the fact is that there's no hard and fast rule that if, for example, you go over by 5 words, you will be penalized. So the examiner can also make out, you should also be able to make out that at the end of the day, how many words have I written down. But sir, I think the most important discussion we are going to have in this session is, what is the most important principle is you answer the question.
Yes.
And answering the question therefore needs directive words understanding. And that is the purpose of this session in that regard, that we want to discuss the directive words through examples so that you understand everything properly. Make and break is structure, but because we are writing 250 or 150 words, the argument is that you can't be writing everything. In certain questions you will have too much to write. In certain questions you have too little to write. So you have to reach that 250 or 150, and at the same point of time you have to be very, very comprehensive in answering the question. Sir, in Delhi University there is a saying that you ask us anything, we will write what we know.
Yeah.
That principle won't work in
and
UPSC.
I'm pretty sure you are a product of university exams in India, and I am also, and all the viewers are also.
We write what we want to write.
So generally the practice is that if the paper is blank, we will try to fill it. And our thinking is that, okay, at least even if I don't write up to point of whatever the question is, even if the evaluator will give you 1 marks in every sheet, I'll get the passing marks.
And here
That
I think 1 mark is the
tendency.
difference between first and second rank, sir.
Yes, that's a reason. Be very, let's say, restrict to the point. If you know, let's say, 150 words for a particular question, write it. If you have the space to, let's say, expand a statement, expand it, but do not simply overcross the limit. And at the same point of time, sir, when you talk about the structuring, introduction, main body and conclusion,
Right.
what do you think should be the weightage of number of words in each of them?
So what I say is that this should be 20 to 30 words. This should be 20 to 30 words. And this one varies according to how big the question is. So for example, for 150 you'll write 100, for 250 you'll write 150. Though there's no part and parcel, because I think in economics not every question needs a very elaborate introduction, and at the same point of time in history it becomes important because historical context is very important. You have to give context or the current affairs part in that regard. So this should be basic, but as you said, sir, you can't be counting. Please make sure we get a lot of questions in class in our plus courses, so that I've gone over by 10 words, should I do something about it? No, it's okay. It's okay until unless it doesn't look like that you've written 500 words for a 250 word answer.
I completely agree with you, sir, in terms of, let's say, giving weightages. Because I've seen many students, when we give, let's say, questions at the end of the week and they write answers, they ask us to look into the answers. What I generally see is, if a student, imagine I've given a question on GST.
Right.
The question is something related to GST. Let's say discuss the issues related to GST. Why GST is yet to become a good and simple tax.
Right.
The student knows the GST. And what they will do is they will fill the introduction with 100 words about the concept of GST.
Oh.
And within those particular 100 words, 15 or 20 times they would have written GST itself. So I keep on joking in the class. I tell the students, If the question is about something about GST, out of 250 words, you will write 50 times GST, which is 20% weightage of the words.
True.
So that has to be avoided. Please avoid repeating the same terms, or let's say the title of the question again and again, and try to have weightages and give the highest weightage for the main body. Keep that in mind. Give the highest weightage. Whatever, let's say 250 words, I would simply recommend, like you have written, around 150 words here, and around 40 to 50, 40 to 50. And so that you will be able to hit 250 words, and also you will ensure that most of the number of words you have written in the main body.
And I think when you will write an answer, you will also be able to make out. If you actually exceed in the introduction, it shows like a very big part is written here, and then 2 points, and then a very small. So please be very clear that aesthetics matters. And when you write an answer, an examiner can make out where you've actually written more. And as sir said, firstly, if you're writing GST, first write goods and services tax, then bracket GST, and then write GST everywhere. Because a lot of students start to write MG for Mahatma Gandhi.
Acronyms.
Acronyms.
Yes.
Acronyms need to be avoided as much as possible. But for example, for GST, you can't write goods and services tax everywhere. So do specify. So first write Supreme Court and then bracket SC. Then you can use the word SC. But in a Supreme Court type thing, you should write Supreme Court only. So the idea, sir, I think before we move to the directive words, is that when we are doing answer writing, how do we develop this acumen to understand how many words I've written, and how do I understand, or how do I structure better? Because at the end of the day, it is like a learning curve. It's like driving a car. You slowly learn it. So what is the mantra with regards to mains answer writing?
So there's a very famous saying, Rome was not built in a day.
True.
The same I would tell the students. Do not expect that you will become an expert by writing answers in one day. It's a continuous process. It's not a 100-meter sprint, it's a marathon. You have a lot of days now. Every day you need to pick up questions. For example, take up newspaper articles. In today's newspaper, multiple editorials have come. If you do not have any other test papers to, let's say, write, or let's say basically practice, take up an editorial. Prepare a question, read the editorial, and try to see, are you able to answer the question within 250 words or 150 words. If the student does this repeatedly, day after, every day, I'm pretty sure in a span of 1.5 months, they would have cracked how to write a very good mains answer. But again, practice.
Practice, practice, and practice. That is the basic mantra here. And I think, sir, in that sense, if a student is expecting very quick change, even in handwriting or in answer writing, that is the wrong expectation. Let's be very, very honest. A student, when he starts from day one, they say that, sir, when should I start answer writing? The answer to that question is today. And it could be that you take 45 minutes to write an answer. It could be that you're copying from the PPT. And I think with us, you will never have a dearth of questions. Rather, you will say, sir, why so many questions? On Sunday, we'll give you 5 questions. As it is, the test series is always on. And in CNA also, we're giving questions. The idea is very simple. Please don't expect quick change. And you cannot be changing everything between prelims and mains. Nobody can master mains answer writing between these two. There will be exceptions, there are extraordinary people, but for a good candidate who's very serious, day one, start your preparation. Day one, make sure that you're writing answers. And I think, sir, I don't know if you'll agree with me or here, that initially it doesn't matter how much time you take. This is immaterial initially. What is more important is you have to write with right grammar, with right spellings. You can't be making spelling mistakes, and structure. Once that is sorted, this will come to you.
Sir, anyway, if a student has not practiced till now, if a student has written prelims and is scoring very good number of marks and is confident of clearing prelims now, he has not practiced. What would you recommend that particular student to do in the next number of days?
First, join our QEP because that is going to be a game changer. But other than that, I'll see. If, as you said, you were not expecting, but you got a very good set of marks, you were not able to practice, then what you have to do is, you have 90 days, close to 90 days, now not even 90 days in that regard, then you have to practice at least 2 to 3 answers in a day.
Yes.
It is See, ideally, that should not be the case. But for example, we have some students who are in that zone that they're actually clearing, but they don't have answer writing sorted out. So firstly, for example, a QEP program will help you get the right set of questions. Sir will explain everything, then he will give you a question, he will give you notes, everything will be sorted in that regard. But also, then your at least 2 to 3 hours answer writing, so that you are expediting or you're accelerating something which should have been done 6 months. So in that sense, your effort needs to increase. And if you are in a, for example, a guided program, or if you have certain form of guidance, you should be writing good answers. For example, there's no trial and error now. Yes. For a student who is in this 3-month period, now there's no trial and error. You have to write a good answer, and you should have right evaluation also. Because sometimes what happens is that the evaluation could be so mediocre that you think you're writing good answers, but that may not be the case. So my mantra is, sir, you have to practice more, but I think practice is the mantra here.
It's a complete cycle.
Yeah.
It's not just writing, it's also getting the feedback on your writing.
True.
Whether your, let's say, structure of the answer is correct, whether your answer is as per the question which has been asked.
True.
Right? Are you writing a good conclusion? Are you ending on a negative note or a positive note?
True. True.
The feedback also matters.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So one of the areas that we generally get a lot of queries is the directives which are used in the mains questions. Directives are also directions. For example, you must have come across the term elucidate, analyze,
elaborate,
explain, elaborate, discuss, which in every class, in every batch, for all of us, there will be questions based on this. That is, the students will keep on asking us, sir, what is the difference between critically evaluate and discuss?
Right.
I get confused.
Right.
Right. What is the difference between, let's say, analyze and explain? I get confused.
Most of them think it's the same thing.
Yes.
There are subtle differences that.
Yes. So in this particular session, what we'll be doing is, we'll take up certain number of these particular key terms or the keywords or the directives, and just to illustrate what is the importance of this particular keyword, what is the difference between this keyword compared to the next keyword, we will take up some of the previous year questions and give you a model answer, just so that this term keywords is very clear to you.
So all the questions here are actually previous year questions, both economics and history. That way is a good mix of subjects, because one needs a lot of technical knowledge along with current affairs. The other one that way is quite static and needs a lot of historical understanding and conceptual understanding to be put down on paper. And remember one more thing, what sir is trying to do and what I am trying to do is that we are trying to give you this subtle differentiation, because analyze, explain, examine sound the same, but have little bit of differences, and that is where the examiner expects you to understand and also be able to answer the question in that same direction. So I think, sir, we'll start with the first one, which is comment and enumerate. Yes.
So I've taken two terms here. One is the comment and the second one is enumerate. Let me start with the easiest one, the second term, enumerate. If you come across the term enumerate, please don't make a mistake. Enumerate simply means listing. You need to simply list whatever has been asked with the term enumerate. For example, let me show you a previous year question.
Yes.
Enumerate the indirect taxes which have been subsumed in the goods and services tax. This question was asked in the year 2019 in GS paper 3. Now, when the examiner is giving you the term enumerate, please don't waste your time in writing the history of GST. Don't tell the examiner that the GST was introduced by so many countries across the world so many times. India, so much discussion has happened. This has happened. The finance ministers proposed this, etc., etc. All you need to do is simply start with an introduction here. Start with an introduction. And many of you will ask me, sir, what kind of introduction should I write? Start with an introduction simply defining goods and services tax. 1 or 2 lines. Goods and services tax is a very important indirect taxation reform which has been implemented by the government from 2017. Under these are the indirect taxes which have been subsumed at the central as well as the state level. If you list out the taxes which have been basically subsumed at the central level first, couple of taxes, right? Let's say 1, 2, 3 and 4, such as the service taxes, some of the additional excise, additional customs duties, etc. and you need to list out certain state taxes such as sales tax or the earlier VAT system, which have been basically brought under the ambit of GST. That is basically enumeration. So again, I'll repeat it. Enumeration essentially means list out. There's a second term.
Sir, before
comment.
you move to comment,
Yeah.
now this is a very good question to explain one thing, which is there are two parts to the question.
Yes.
Enumerate indirect taxes and comment on the revenue
Yes.
implications. Now, in that context, how much weightage are you giving to each area? Are you interlinking it, or you are separately dealing with both?
Sir, there are two parts of the question, as you rightly mentioned. What I would be doing is, I'll start with the introduction, that's a definition, and enumerate, I will not be writing too much on enumeration. I will list out 4 to 5 taxes of the central government as well as 4 to 5 taxes of the state government which have been brought under the ambit of GST. That's it. Because beyond that, there's a second part of the question. Comment on the revenue implications. Comment on the revenue implications of the GST, which is much more analytical part. First one is a factual, and remember, whenever there's a factual information that you need to provide, simply list them. Simply list them. And when you need to explain something, you can use either paragraphs or you can use even the pointers there. So second point, comment. Comment essentially means what? A statement is provided to you. Okay, a particular, let's say, problem is given to you in the form of a statement. You will have to give your opinion on the problem or on the topic or the statement that has been provided. So what is the topic given here? Revenue implications. GST has been introduced. What are the revenue implications of the GST? That's a problem statement. So start writing the revenue implications one after the other. And because you are writing multiple revenue implications, again, I would recommend follow a point format here as well. For example, what are the revenue implications of implementation of GST? 1. With implementation of GST, certain tax powers which were earlier there with the state governments now have been subsumed, have been brought under the ambit of GST. Individually, the states do not have the power to decide what are the tax rates now. Second, many of the state governments were concerned, if I give away my taxation power, what about my revenues? And that is where the government of India introduced the concept of compensation. And if you are reading the current affairs, you will know that a lot of the states are demanding that center should continue providing the GST compensation. Third one, many of these particular components which are even today not covered under the ambit of GST. What are the revenue implications if these are brought? Why these have been kept out of the ambit of the GST? For example, the liquor for human consumption, petroleum products, etc. There are so many commodities which do not have the GST right now. Fourth revenue implication. With implementation of GST, the tax base has increased. Economic Survey has given the data. Tax buoyancy has increased. Economic Survey data is there. The amount of revenue collected under the GST, the average monthly collections have crossed a very high level now. The data is there from the current affairs. So there are so many revenue implications, let's say the pointers that you can pick up from the current affairs to prove or to basically elaborate on this particular point of revenue implications.
So, but they have to elaborate on each and every revenue implication, or they have to just quote it, because the words are, it's a most probably a 15 marker. So that ways, because there are two components and they're already writing point wise.
Yes.
So will they have to write revenue implication one line, or they just write the revenue implication? That's it.
Sir, that's the reason I said do not spend too many words on the first part.
Okay.
Do not spend too many words. Let's say this is a 150 worder. There is no way forward here. It's not a problem. Right? So basically argument is do not spend too much words in the first part. Simply list. Don't keep on explaining them. Right? Because please understand, there are 40 types of cesses as well as taxes which have been brought under the ambit of GST. You cannot remember all of them. You should not list out all of them, because there itself will cross 250 words. So write 4 or 5 at center, state, hardly how many words? 20 words. Introduction, another 20 words, 40 words. You have 100 plus words with the next part. That's the reason I said second part of the question is much more important, where if you add the current affairs points, trust me, the evaluator will be impressed with your answer and they will give you more number of marks.
Right.
Then, sir, comment and enumerate. This is basically the two directives. Next one is elaborate. Sir, you please take it up.
Thank you, sir. So, when we talk about elaborate, firstly, elaborate has different forms which it can take. Substantiate is also one. You can also get demonstrate. Demonstrate, elaborate, substantiate mostly are the same. So please do understand one thing, they are the same meaning. Now elaborate itself or demonstrate or substantiate itself means that if I have a question, for example, and I have a statement, I have to elaborate on that given statement through examples or through certain instances which may be there. Now let's take an example here from modern India, which is many voices had strengthened and enriched the national movement during the Gandhian phase. Elaborate. Now basically it is giving you an assertion. It is giving you an assertion that many voices were there which were strengthened and enriched during the Gandhian phase. So it has given you an assertion that this is what is the problem statement. Now elaborate how this is true or is it not true. So therefore in this type of a question, see, in history you generally keep a structure of a paragraph for introduction, point wise for the body, and paragraph for conclusion. This may not be true for economics or other subjects. What is important here is it aesthetically looks good, and over and above that it will give you a lot of leverage with words. You will not waste words in that regard. Now in this type of question, in the introduction you can just talk about the Gandhian phase itself, that from moderates to extremists, the Gandhian phase introduced in 1915 itself introduced a new nature of the national movement, and that is based on many voices. I've just used 10 to 15 words. Now my introduction is done. Thereafter in the point wise I will give the voices. I have to demonstrate, I have to enumerate, I have to in a way elaborate. So that ways I am elaborating, I am demonstrating, I am substantiating on this claim by saying first, many voices. First was the voices of the peasants, which were added during the national movement, wherein Gandhi brought in the peasants into the national movement. Then it was the workers who were through the Ahmedabad movement itself, or Ahmedabad Satyagrah, they were brought in into the movement. Then students. Thereafter women. Women were previously not taken a part of the national movement itself. Then you can also talk about in the Gandhian phase, for example, Khilafat. Khilafat was another voice which was within the national movement at this point of time, got integrated with the national movement. Why? Because Gandhi wanted to integrate Punjab wrongs and the Khilafat. At the same point of time, you can also talk about Swarajist no changes, wherein when Gandhi isn't there, what are the voices? You can also talk about the revolutionaries. See, in a question like this, you have a lot to write. You can write quite a lot. So what I want is, you will just write the student, one line. Thereafter, you will write women, you will write workers, you will write peasants, and give one line about each one of them, because you can't waste words and you can't just write a thesis on women itself or just a thesis on the workers in that regard. The idea is you don't substantiate too much on each of the points. It is asking you to elaborate. I have elaborated in that regard. So that ways the answer looks neat, clean, and the examiner also knows, okay, the student knows all the voices. He may not even read what is written further because he understands the question.
So I have one doubt here.
Right.
I was listening to whatever pointers you are telling me. For a fact, I don't remember so many points.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure many of the students will also echo the same thing. There's a very funny statement. My brain is a very funny thing. There is nothing right in the left during the exams and there is nothing left in the right.
True.
So let's say out of the 5 pointers that you said, if I write all the 5 pointers and one line, I can easily hit, let's say, 150 or 250 words. What if I don't remember, let's say, 2 or 3 pointers out of this? Should I elaborate on these particular points only, or should I simply say, okay, this is sufficient?
So what will happen is, by doing that, if you're writing too much about students, workers or women, and the examiner can say that you've only elaborated on one, there will always be the case that there will be something more. If there is Khilafat, there will be something more also. If you are not basically able to remember, that's a separate issue altogether, then you can obviously substantiate. However, what is ideal is the difference between, in this question, a 5 or a 6 or a 7 is going to be this only. The examiner, this is where you students have to understand that a lot of students say to us that I got a 5 but he got a 6. Aisa kaise? I also wrote the same points, but it is not that. It is how you wrote the points and how many points you wrote. For example, the GST question also, it's not that you need the whole list of the taxes itself. Major ones need to be there. Same way here, they are looking for certain things. For example, if it is Gandhian phase and you're not talking about peasants, workers, women, and for example, the students, then there's an issue in the understanding that will reflect here. In history, it is very easy to that ways reflect that you don't understand. That is true for your subject also, sir.
Yes.
If you are actually beating around the bush in this type of a question, it will show that GST I've written multiple times. I don't remember the revenue implication.
In that case, can I recommend something? Just let me know whether I'm correct or not.
Right.
Whenever you read a question, I would recommend that out of 20 questions, you start with the easiest ones.
To practice.
No, in the examination and they can emulate the same thing when you are practicing, let's say, a test paper. Do not start with the first question and get stuck up with the first question and have this aim of finishing first and only then going to the second one.
This is a standard strategy which is done in universities also.
Point 1.
You do questions which you know first so that you are fresh and you write everything properly.
Your confidence will automatically increase.
True.
Second pointer, whenever you read a question, do not immediately start writing the answer. Take a pause. Question paper is not going to run away, nor is the answer paper. Take a pause. Rough work is there. I would recommend make certain points.
Right.
Because in the process of writing an answer, what might happen is, this happens with me also many of the times, I might not structure the points correctly. I will write the conclusion, then I'll remember I have left out one more very important point in the main body. Or I have not structured the main body correctly, or my introduction is not correct.
This is a standard practice, sir. That in the rough page or in a rough sheet, just write the points which you want to write, so that if there's confusion, it is here only. It is not here. That is true. So in this type of question, sir's strategy is going to work very well, which is that I know in the side itself, I will write, okay, I have to write about students, I have to write about them. Then what will happen is, here it will not show that you were thinking. For example, in the conclusion, I also add one more voice. That makes no sense. So that way, sir is totally correct in saying, and this is a standard strategy. I think in prelims also we do this, where we only do the questions first which we know, then we come back to the questions. Same for mains, and at the same point of time having a rough sheet in which you can, and you are allowed to do that. You can't write the answer on the question paper, remember, because that is going to be problematic. It's disciplinary action with regards to that. But you can always ask for a rough sheet, or in the back side of the question paper, make small points, make it with a pencil so that you can actually remove it also. Sir, let's move to the next one, which is critical evaluate.
So before going forward, let me ask you one more question, because this doesn't pop up in economics, but definitely it's in geography, ecology and history it will pop up. Should the student practice drawing pictures in the mains answer sheet?
Sir, in geography and environment, I think I'm speaking for Mukesh sir here.
Yes.
That it is important, but it shouldn't be that, for example, the sheet looks like this and your India map is this big. It should be proportional. Second thing is, in history, there are, for example, in art and culture, for example, in certain aspects of modern India where you can show, for example, the All India Federation. There it makes sense. It should not be that you're forcing a diagram. In geography, in environment, it makes sense. In history and in economics, it would make sense to make maybe a flow chart so that it is summarizing everything. And in polity, you can't make a diagram that way.
In economics, the requirement will be very less. But let's say in art and culture,
you can. I teach that when you are in class, I actually give you a practice. This is a standard thing which I do in class, which is, for example, Mauryan pillar, for example, Nagara style temple, Dravida style temple, or a stupa. I teach you how to make it in 30 seconds, because it should not be that this map which you've made, it took you 5 minutes to make it. So it should be quick, 30 seconds, maximum 1 minute you should be putting in so as to make this diagram. But yes, sir, I think one of the toppers also said this point, that in history optional and everywhere, a diagram gives a quality enhancement that way, and also aesthetically looks better that way. Let's look at critically evaluate.
Next key term is critically evaluate. One of the very famous terms, and multiple times the term has been used in the GS paper 3 as well as many other papers. What is the meaning of the term critically evaluate? Please understand, whenever they give you a term such as evaluate or critically evaluate, the examiner is simply asking you to give the viewpoints on both the sides. You'll have to write the positive aspect of the topic mentioned, and also you'll have to write the negative aspect or the concerning factor regarding the subject or the topic mentioned in the question. For example, take this question. In view of the declining average size of the land holdings in India, which has made agriculture non-viable for a majority of the farmers, should contract farming and land leasing be promoted in agriculture? Critically evaluate the pros as well as the cons. You're lucky here because the term pros and cons is directly mentioned. But you may not be so lucky in every exam or every year that you are appearing for the examination or in every paper as well. So whenever they use the term critically evaluate or simply critically examine or critically, let's say discuss something of that sort, and they use the term critically, remember, you need to simply mention both the sides of the argument, not just the one side, both the sides of the argument. In this case, I will start with a very short introduction. Take the agriculture census data. You will see that as per the agriculture census data, the average size of the land holding has been declining. It is somewhere around 1.2 hectares now. And the number of, let's say, the farm holdings, number of farm holdings have increased because the number of farm holdings which are less than 1 hectare, less than 2 hectares, the number of small and marginal farm holdings have increased. And when these farm holdings increase, the farmers, more than 86% of the farming is small and marginal. That will actually reduce the revenue potential for the farmers. And when the farmers are so poor, automatically they will not be able to invest in technology. But again, you cannot write such a lengthy introduction. Keep it very short. Mention as per agriculture census, the farm holdings have shrunk. The number of farm holdings have increased. Hence, farming has become non-viable. You have addressed the first part of it. Now, critically evaluate. What should you critically evaluate? Not related to agriculture, farm holding per se. You will have to focus on, whether should we promote contract farming and land leasing. Your discussion should be on contract farming and land leasing. Be very, very careful. Do not focus on size holdings beyond this. Focus on contract farming and land leasing. In the main body, you can mention what is land leasing, what is contract farming. Even if you want, you can mention certain committee recommendations. Many committee recommendations such as Niti Aayog committee recommendation is there to basically legalize or give the statutory status to the concept of land leasing. So you can mention the idea of a land leasing and contract farming, mention what would be the merits of it. You are basically critically evaluating merits of these kinds of agriculture practices. It will give access to, let's say, the buyers in the market. More marketable surplus can be produced. Access to better technology will be made available, etc., etc. Having said so, you will have to give the negative aspect as well. So what are the negative aspects of contract farming as well as land leasing? States will have to implement the laws. And in many of the states, they are yet to take up any measure regarding land leasing law, despite central government promoting the concept of land leasing. The idea of, let's say, the corporatization of agriculture sector, there are so many concerns. Mention the concerns as well. And thereafter, you can provide a conclusion. Provide a conclusion and say that it is imperative now that the governments, not only the center, along with the state cooperation, we will implement certain reforms in the land areas so that agriculture sector will become remunerative enough. So whenever the critical evaluation question is asked, please remember, you'll have to write both the sides of the argument, the positive aspect as well as the negative aspect. But before I hand over the discussion to Abhishek sir with the next directive, here is a very important term. Do not end your answer on negative basis. Please never end your answer, because remember, you want to become a civil servant. You should be part of the solution, not basically finding out and saying this is a problem, done. Right? We cannot do anything. You cannot end your answer on a negative terms. Always end your answer on a positive term. So this is one more key term, critically evaluate. Next one is discuss. Abhishek,
sir, I just want to ask you one thing. Is this a feature of economics questions which having two parts? Is this quite common in GS paper 3?
Yes, generally what you see is, again, it's not compulsory that all the questions will be like this. Whenever you look at the GS paper 3 and especially the Indian economy part, what you'll see is generally there is a mixture of certain questions which are very static in nature and remaining questions very much dynamic in nature.
Okay. So
and there are certain questions which they will pick it up from a book, any book, doesn't matter, there is no golden book per se. Any book that you have read, you can easily answer to that particular question. For example, couple of years ago, they asked a question, discuss the capital side of the budget as well as revenue side of the budget. This, even the student, if they have read NCERT book, they would have answered it.
Okay.
At the same point of time, they will also ask a question, how PPP is important in the airport sector, which you generally don't get in any of the books. If you have read the current affairs, you will answer.
So in the dynamic questions, this is the structure which is getting followed.
Generally what they will try to do is they will try to bring in two components of the same, let's say, idea or the concept, and they will club it and give it. And if you know the static part as well as the dynamic part, you can answer it very well. If you know only static, you will keep on repeating the same term again and again.
As I said. And one more very important thing, see, critically can be added to 2-3 directives. Critically can be added to critically examine, critically analyze, critically evaluate, as it is written here. So critically basically gives you a certain license, which is, if it says evaluate and if the tone of the question is positive, you don't talk about the negative. That's a very big no-no. You don't talk about the negative. But if it says critically, it means that you have to give the positive and negative both. But as sir said, you have to end on a middle path. You, at the end of the day, you're going to work for the government. You can't just say that everything is bad and everything is good. That balancing will come when you will build an opinion, when you will study static, when you will study current affairs. If you read the right articles, and that is why not everything in the newspaper is important, because sometimes the articles may be giving you a very negative understanding. That is where we come in, we try to balance it and give you both sides. And this is not something where you have to basically keep your morals or values aside, but whilst you are a UPSC aspirant, what is expected is that you remain within this positive and negative and give a middle path. Thereafter, once you become an IAS officer, everybody holds their own public personal opinion, totally fine. So remember, in critically, don't go to the other spectrum of giving totally negative, or go to the other spectrum of, for example, positive. For example, there was a question in history which said that what would have been the course of history or national movement without Gandhi?
Okay.
Now you can't say on one side that without Gandhi no independence, and on other side say Gandhi or not we would got independence. So therein you are first demeaning either the other national leaders or you're saying Gandhi is too important. So in that type of question, though it did not say critically, you have to take a middle path, that yes, we would have got independence, maybe delayed, equally important role played by both sides, which is Gandhi and the other personalities. So that way this word is quite critical to understand. Critically critical, remember, this gives you a license, but not the license to give a negative conclusion, a positive, balanced conclusion.
And one more point I just want to add, sir. Whenever you write, let's say, positive aspects as well as negative aspect, do not focus too much on negative aspects only. Underline the term only. Because we have seen many of the students who will write, let's say, one positive aspect, and again, we are humans. We attract a lot of negative things. We will be focused on negative things. We will write 10 negatives of a scheme. Don't do that. Have a balanced approach.
Perfect.
Always have a balanced approach.
3 points here, so 3 points here. It's not 3 and 10, it should not be that case. And we are actually not trying to push you to become a centralist that way. We are just trying to say that you have to develop a certain opinion for the purpose of the examination. Because in most of the economics questions, there would always be certain form of criticisms which would always come out, and you have to control that urge. Remember, only critically gives you the license. If it is only evaluate, then you have to write as per the tone of the question, not critically. Okay, with this, let's look at the most easiest of all, which is discuss. This you will see in most of the cases with regards to questions in polity, be it economics, be it geography. When we talk about discuss, the simple mantra with discuss is you give the points which support the argument, or you just enumerate or in a way write whatever is the basic argument of that question. For example, it says discuss the main contributions of Gupta period and Chola period to Indian heritage and culture. Now this means it is asking the contribution, it is asking you to discuss it for Chola and Gupta. So in this type of a question, you don't have to analyze, you don't have to examine, you don't have to explain, you have to just in a way give the basic points which give the contribution. So in the introduction, you can say that the Gupta and the Chola period, that was quite important when it comes to the Indian art and culture, a golden age of literature, and generally what we today call as the golden age of literature plus art plus the period in which temples started to develop. And you can talk about how Cholas take it to a next level altogether, wherein they take the Nagara Dravida or thereafter from Pallava to a new zenith itself in South India. So in this, you don't have to write too much, only 2 points, that the Gupta and Chola period are extremely important when it comes to the Indian art and heritage, because during this period, there was a certain development which led to the maturity and the concept reaching its zenith. Now, here you have to control your urge. You can't be writing about Cholas too much. You can't be writing about Guptas too much. So you are in your mind going to divide two parts. You will write Gupta, then 3 points here, Chola, 3 points here. Now, a good answer is going to give their contributions similar thematic. Meaning, if you're talking about Gupta, talk about literature. But in Chola also, you talk about literature. That way there is similarity and continuity. Then you can go to sculpture, which is the Gupta school itself. Then you can talk about lost wax technique and the Nataraja. And thereafter, in the third part, you talk about architecture, which is Nagara style, and temple building starts in the Gupta period. And in this head, you can also go into the Dravida reaching its zenith with monumentality. Now, if you can figure out, basically, this is an analytical question of art and culture, and therefore it is not specifically asking you about any specific what we call as architectural development or literary development. It is asking about period. So when they are asking about period, you have to basically divide the answer according to heads. Now this is where Sir's technique of writing the points in the side will matter. Because if you're writing something quite specific to Chola and nothing for Gupta, it doesn't look good. And in the conclusion, you can very simply say, based on the above enumerated points, it is very, very clear that the contributions of Gupta and Chola are quite important in Indian heritage and culture. Simple, straightforward. This was a 250-word answer. That was quite easy, sir. So discuss, just write the basic points. Don't have to over-analyze it that way.
Sir, let's say, instead of a discuss, there is another key term. And instead of 250 words, let's say 150 words are asked. I have so much of content and I want to express all these particular points in an answer.
Right.
I want to score maximum number of marks.
Right.
So if I write all the points one by one, I will automatically hit more than 150 words.
Easily.
In such case, can I use a table instead of this?
Sure. But the key remains that,
for example, you said art and architecture. I will have a tab like this and I'll compare Gupta and Chola.
That is where the structuring of the table matters. If you put all of this into a table like this, then you're still writing the same words. Rather, it's a 3-head table wherein you're saying Gupta, Chola and concept, architecture, sculpture. That way you can write 3 basic points without using a lot of words. See, the examiner is not testing if you know English. You know English. They want to check if you understand the question or not. And therefore, it's not always important to just write. Sometimes people ask, what is the level of language which is needed in the examination? That is NCERT level. That is why we ask you to read NCERT. Don't have to become a certain personality in politics in that regard. I will not name him, but you don't have to become him. So that you don't have to speak in a language or write in language where the examiner has to open the dictionary. That is not the case. So that way, sir is saying, see, these are tricks which you will learn as you write. Because what will happen is, if you write this question 150, as you said, you will over-exceed, then you have to find a better way. Now, in this, remember one thing. Don't make it too short also. You can't be, see, this is the table, figure it out. That should also not be the case. That I have written it down, now you figure it out what it is. That should also not be the case. But yes, this helps. This helps. Sometimes tables can help. And a lot of students say, can we make flowcharts? Sure, but supplementary. You have to write the content, supplement it with the flowchart. A flowchart in itself is not the answer. Please be very clear about this. Flowchart is never the answer. If you're saving time by doing that, you're basically taking away marks. So we've discussed evaluate, elaborate, discuss, and critically evaluate. Now 2-3 ones which sound very same. Explain, analyze, very similar sounding. Let's figure this out, sir.
Next one is explain. Let me take a question. With the help of the question, I'll explain what is the directive. Explain. How does e-technology help farmers in production and marketing of agriculture produce? Explain it. This question was asked in the mains 2023. Although there is one more question which was asked in 2022. Again, using the same key term, explain. Let me take up the first question. Explain essentially means a statement is given to you. You will have to take the statement and provide the details of the statement. You assume the statement is correct. Don't try to prove whether the statement is correct or not. That is not critical evaluation. Don't try to do that. Take the statement whichever is given in the form of a question, and at the end of the question or at the end of the statement, they say explain it. Look at the second one. Economic growth in recent past has been led by an increase in labor productivity. Explain this statement. The statement is given. You'll have to simply explain how labor productivity has actually led to higher economic growth in the Indian economy. So do not try to go for a critical evaluation here. Explain simply means a statement or a topic is given to you. You simply need to provide the details regarding the topic. Let me take up the first one. How does e-technology help farmers in production and marketing of agriculture produce? Start with a very simple introduction. E-technology. How e-technology or what is e-technology in agriculture sector? Mention it. Do not spend or do not write an essay on the concept of e-technology in the introduction itself. Come to the importance of e-technology. Mention how e-technology will help in increasing production, increasing productivity, remote sensing, or let's say climate, weather forecasting, etc. Or you can use the term drone technology which is being promoted by the government, or ENAM which will help in marketing of agriculture commodities, etc. etc. There are so many technologies which are there in the current affairs itself. And mind you, answer to these kind of questions, do not search for them in the textbook. Do not search for them in the NCRTs. Do not search for them in the books. You better take up the current affair material and update your current affairs material. So use the current affairs such as ENAM, which is very often being discussed, drone technology, which is often being discussed. So mention these kind of technologies, how they will help in increasing production, increasing productivity, and it will basically help the farmers in Indian economy. So a statement is given, you need to simply explain the statement. Don't go for critical evaluation. Do not start pointing out what are the problems with, let's say, technology in agriculture sector. Do not start discussing whether technology is available to all the farmers in India or not. That is not the scope of the question. Scope of the question is basically how technology will help in increasing agriculture produce. Just stick to that. If the question was, let's say, something else, for example, though technology will promote, let's say, will help in government achieving doubling of the income of the farmers, lot of technology is inaccessible to the farmers. Discuss or elaborate. If that kind of a statement is given, answer will be different for that. In that case, you'll have to mention what are the problems. Why the farmers are not able to get access to this kind of a technology in India? Is it because most of the farmers are small and marginal? Is it because the technology, though the farmers have certain amount of money, technology is inaccessible? Is it because of lack of R&D in India? That focus will be different and this focus will be different. So again, I reiterate my point. Do not try to go for a critical evaluation because you know what is the problem with e-technology. Just focus on the statement given and explain the statement in detail. Provide details about the statement. That is basically the key term, explain. Next key term.
Sir, now see, these are very similar ones, which is explain, sir has just explained, and then there is examine. Now when we talk about explain and examine, there's a difference. The difference is key to you getting marks. See, in explain, sir said that you have to give the points and you have to elaborate on each of these points, therefore explaining them. Now in examine, there's a different context. In examine, what you do is that you give the points for sure, but you compare, contrast, and look at the larger context. Meaning, you have to contextualize it vis-a-vis examining it in the larger context. This is the main differentiation here, wherein in explain you just elaborate on each and every point. On the other hand, in examine you compare, contrast, and how you examine something, you are examining it vis-a-vis other things in that regard. So look at this question. Examine critically the various facets of economic policies of the British in India from mid 18th century till independence. Very recent question, 2023. See, it is asking you to examine, but in critical sense, facets, meaning the features of the policies which the British followed in mid 18th century till independence, basically the economic policy. Now here, in the introduction, you very simply say that since their inception in India, the East India Company and thereafter the Crown were generally here for exploitation. And therefore exploitation, you need a good economic policy so that you can in a way extract as much as possible. That is the in a way looting of India through multiple channels. Now, you have to give 4 major points here, because you're examining it vis-a-vis other policies. So you cannot just write about land revenue, you cannot just write about commercialization or deindustrialization or drain. You have to write about all: land, commercialization, land revenue, commercialization, deindustrialization, drain, and if possible, if you are able to push in that, famines. Now, I have given the points that land revenue system such as permanent settlement was introduced. The commercialization of agriculture was because of the fact that there was a need for more what we call as demand from the state. So they moved from grain to cash crops. Therefore, there was a shortage of grains, which in turn led to deindustrialization because the grain wage went down. A concept of grain wage in which basically the additional income of the weaver is down or is gone, and over and above that, at the same point of time, his purchasing power has gone down because grains have become expensive. This in turn, through multiple channels of drain, in turn led to the economic policies of the British draining everything out of India, and the ultimate impact was famine. Now, in the conclusion, I want you to examine. This is where the examining part will come in. And therein you will say that based on these principles, it is very clear that the British were able to extract as much revenue as possible, and there were multiple channels. Now, because it is saying critically, I have to write positive. But the problem is, if I'm writing positive, I'm justifying colonialism. So what I will do is, I will add a small line here, that though railways, telegraph and other processes were also introduced, however, they were also part of the larger economic policy to facilitate it. So therefore, here the examiner understood that if I'm writing a rosy picture, that railways came, telegraph came, India became modern India, that is a very dangerous way of arguing. So you have to, in this question, keep it negative, which is the real facts about economic policy, but at the same point of time, just give one line saying that I know that there is also some positive, but that is also negative. So this is here where you have to think. Here you can't just say, okay, critical hai, so I will give positive, negative, I'll make a table, positive railway, bad land revenue. No, because in the end, railways were there to extract revenue only. So they were piercing the heart of the self-sufficient village in that regard. And therefore, even the positive here is a negative. So examining, you see, it's an overall answer. If it had said examine land revenue, then I would have examined land revenue vis-a-vis each other. So if this was explain the various facets, then I would not have given an evaluation here. I would have just given the basic points. This is where explain and examine, little bit of differentiation gives you the marks in that regard.
So right. I have a question here.
Yes.
Whenever you practice, let's say either geography, polity for that matter, economics, or let's say even for history, should the students practice underlining key terms in the answers?
Yes, sir. I think one thing is that you should not have 2-3 color pencils. That is a waste of time. With the same pen or maximum a pencil. And I think we were discussing this before we met for this session also, which is that underlining basically draws the attention of the examiner on what is important. So sometimes you can get away with writing a lot of unnecessary points also by writing the main points.
But that will come with practice.
This is a skill. See, you should be very clear that answer writing, unlike solving MCQs, in MCQ it is a game of resemblance, which is the answer is in front of you. Can you identify the answer? Here there is no answer. It is a kora kagaz, it's a blank sheet. So therefore it is you who has to write. And somebody would say that, sir, why should I need to write? But because as an IAS officer, as a bureaucrat, you would have to write memos, you would have to write multiple reports. So you should have the ability to express yourself. But sir is making a very important point that way, is that underlining could be key in that sense. With this, let's move to analyze, sir. We'll take a history question and we'll take a what we call as a inclusive growth, which is economics question. So just before sir goes into this understanding, again to explain you how these are different, explain, examine and analyze, there's a differentiation. Explain also you give points, in examine you also give points, here you also give the basic points. The difference was in explain you started to elaborate each and every point and explain it. Here you compared and contrasted with larger context. In analyze, on the other hand, you rather break down, you deconstruct. A very good analogy is given for analyze, how a surgeon opens up when medical students are training, they deconstruct the body so as to understand even each and every part. That ways, in analyze, you deconstruct the statement and analyze each and every component. For example, in this question, Africa was chopped into states artificially created by accident of European competition. Analyze. Now here, the statement is a vague statement. So what will I do? I will deconstruct. Africa chopped European competition. Now for me, these three words are very important. Basically, it is talking about scramble for Africa and how all African borders in that regard are artificially created because of the fact that there was a lot of imperialistic competition in that regard. Therefore, I have deconstructed. So in the introduction, I will talk about Africa's colonization, and in the body, I will deconstruct that European competition, imperialistic warfare, Berlin Conference, intern led to European competition. Therefore, they divided it very neatly in that regard. Artificially is also a very important word, wherein there was no natural division. That is why most of the ethnic violence and all the plight of the Africans is that their whole economy was distorted and polity was distorted because of European competition. I think, sir, you can also show the same exact concept.
So in case of, let's say, a question which has been asked in GS paper 3, what are the salient features of inclusive growth? Has India been experiencing such growth process? Analyze and suggest measures for inclusive growth. One such topic that you will come across in GS paper 3 at the end of the Indian economics syllabus is the concept of inclusive growth. Inclusive growth basically encapsulates, it's a summary of whatever you have learned in the beginning part, or let's say the rest of the chapters in the Indian economy. You'll have to apply, let's say, what you have learned in banking sector. You'll have to apply what you have learned in infrastructure. You'll have to apply what you have learned in agriculture. You'll have to apply what you have learned in industries, and not just Indian economy. You can even take up the topics such as ecology and environment, social issues, and connect it to the concept of inclusive growth. That's the reason I generally tell the students, do not try to read all these subjects as individual areas. There will be certain areas which will overlap between ecology and, let's say, economics, geography and economics, social issues and economics, etc. And many of the times it has been seen, the areas that you have learned in GS paper 3, that is, let's say, Indian economy, the questions on those areas have been asked in the GS paper, other GS papers such as geography paper. And that is a very common occurrence in the, let's say, UPSC examination. Please do not worry about it. Now coming to the point here, how do you analyze? There are so many parts. Right? There are so many parts. There are 3 parts to the question, or there are 3 questions within this particular question itself. Break it up. Start with the definition of inclusive growth. That is the meaning of analyze. Break up and start focusing on each of the components. Start with the definition of inclusive growth. World Bank has given a wonderful definition. Memorize it. It's a pace and pattern of the growth. Both are connected to each other. Both of them should be promoted together. So write the definition. Then come to what are the features of inclusive growth. We should be able to reduce, let's say, emissions. We should be able to increase the earnings of the farmers so that the farmers' resides will come down. We should be able to increase industrialization, employment generation. We should be able to ensure rural-urban gap that is existing will come down. Whatever gender wage gaps are present, that should also be reduced. We should be promoting sustainable growth. We should be promoting welfare, etc. That are the features. These are the features of inclusive growth. And analyze and suggest measures for inclusive growth. Despite so many reforms being undertaken by the government in the past couple of decades, even today you will see that there is a problem with inclusive growth in India. We are yet to achieve inclusive growth. So in that particular context, what measures would you recommend? What reforms would you recommend so that the government will move towards the inclusive growth? Take some of the policies of the government and mention them. So this is generally how you approach a question whenever the term analyze is given. You'll have to deconstruct, you'll have to basically break up, focus on each of the components, start answering on each of the components. So these are the various key terms or the directives which are very much required for you to ace the UPSC examination. Now before I hand over the discussion to Abhishek sir, these are certain do's and don'ts from my side. If you are appearing for the upcoming examination, ensure that every day you will practice answer writing. Do not wait for the last week. Do not imagine it will be like the university exam where one day before the examination you will have a lot of coffee, right? Have a night out and early morning you will wake up, go write a very good answer or let's say get passing marks and come back. That is not going to work out for UPSC. Start today itself. If you are yet to start, start right now. So start, practice as many answers as possible every day. Do not miss out on even essay paper as well as the ethics paper. Whatever key terms we have discussed, for example, critically evaluate, analyze, these terminologies are even asked in the case studies in ethics paper. So that's the reason, start practicing. Do not miss out practices on ethics paper as well as essay paper. Practice maps, practice let's say picture drawings of temples, etc. in certain subjects. These pictures are required. These are some of the recommendations that I would strongly advise all of you to practice. Now I'll hand over the discussion to Abhishek sir.
So from my side, three very basic things. Firstly, handwriting matters as much as anybody said anything to you. Handwriting can be changed. It takes time, but it can be changed. So handwriting has to be perfect. It should not be that you're writing for yourself. The examiner should be able to write it properly and understand it properly in that regard. Second is aesthetics matters. So please do not make too much cutting in the question. It doesn't look good. It shows a certain sense of undecisiveness that way. So you have to make sure that you are not cutting. There is good handwriting. And remember one thing very clearly, that at the end of the day, it is only the practice which can take you far away, and you have to make sure that the handwriting part along with the concept of the aesthetics is sorted. Over and above that, also remember one more thing, that in the end, what you will write has to be read not by you but by someone else. And when it is someone else, it will be important that you are able to communicate. Practice the structure, practice the content. Content is key, and in the end you have to make sure that you're able to communicate. In answer writing, it is communication which matters. Don't use a pen which is very, very restrictive, and therefore you have to write in that regard with a certain pen which works. It should not be a very expensive pen, but at the same point of time, you have to make sure that that pen is not restrictive. You should also not use a pen which the ink actually runs out very quickly. All these things have to be taken into consideration. Like when you go into a race, all the things matter, which is the gear, which is the shoes. Here, what matters is the pen, how you take multiple pens with you. Make sure that these basics are sorted in that regard. So before I end, a very important announcement for you. The offer price 24,999 is going to end on 30th June, this Sunday. So if you have ever considered becoming a part of Unacademy, this is the right time. A 10% hike is coming very, very soon. So I hope you found this session very, very useful. Thank you so much for being here. I would like to thank Shyam sir, and we are going to make this effort to make sure that you ace the examination. Remember one more important thing. Once the QEP starts, the first 2 sessions are going to be on YouTube, which is the quality enhancement program Conquer Mains. Thereafter, you have to come to the app. So if you're looking for a good guided program where you get a good feedback, you can consider us for a GS program also and for mains. So with this, thank you so much. Good night. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow with CNA. Take care. Bye-bye.